Yo, what is crack-a-lackin' Ridge Runner Nation? You found us again, and we are super excited for tonight's episode of Ridge Runners Live. Tonight, our guest thru-hiked the Appalachian Trail in 51 days, 16 hours, and 30 minutes, becoming the fastest woman to do so heading in the northbound direction and the second fastest woman to do so all time in either direction. In addition, she founded a nonprofit called Rose City Track Club, where she currently resides in Portland, Oregon. On top of that, she's a very talented musician. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Liz Anjos, how's it going?
Oh my goodness. Thank you for that introduction. It's going really well. I've just been kind of making my way west across the country from the East Coast after finishing the trail.
So where are you at right now?
I'm in Grand Junction, Colorado. I just spent a couple of days in Boulder, and I was just telling these guys earlier that that I'm just kind of meandering and taking my time heading west because of, I'm smiling, but it's not, it's really devastating and sad there of the wildfires and smoke and everything up and down the West Coast. So the air quality in Oregon is really bad right now. So as homesick as I am, I'm just taking my time getting back.
Definitely, yeah. Continue your safe travels across the country there. For those of you that don't know, my name is Wesley Harton, and holding down the fort with me tonight, you guys know him, you guys love him. He's known as the sixth man of the nation, Cam Wrench. How's it going?
Doing really well, Wesley. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. So let's just kick things off how we normally do with our typical first question is what is everyone drinking tonight? Liz, start it off for us.
I forgot I was supposed to have a more special beverage. I'm just drinking water. I thought of how I just met up with a friend and he brought me a bottle of champagne. It's not like I haven't opened it. So I was like, oh, I could just have this big bottle of champagne, but no, I just have water.
You know, no one's ever popped champagne live on the show, and it could still happen tonight.
I could run out to my car and get it. That would be pretty epic.
That would be awesome. Cam, what about you?
So I got a Jackie O's Under a Cloud India Pale Ale. You can't see if you're watching this later on the podcast. The can has a very lovely mama possum on it. And that's why I bought it, because I'm like a child, sort of like easily seduced by shiny packaging in the grocery store.
That's awesome. And for me, I just have a glass of red wine. It's Wine Wednesdays, so I don't really know what kind it is. I'm not going to pretend to know what kind it is, but I've been trying to get more into the wine, so I'm thoroughly enjoying my beverage so far tonight. You can find the show on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're on Strava, we're over there too. Our handle is @RidgeRunners on all platforms. Liz, let's start off by getting to know you a little bit. Walk us through who you are and how you got into running.
Oh, well, let's see. I am a musician. I come from a musical family. I was born in Salem, Oregon, but I grew up in southeastern Pennsylvania. Let's see. And so I guess in relating to the trail, I hiked a little bit of the Appalachian Trail at a young age, and I just like a couple days, and that's how I learned about the trail and what it was. So that just kind of like sparks the idea of one day hiking the AT. And then I started running at the age of 14. I was going into a new high school. My dad thought it would be good if I signed up for a sport just as a way to like find community and make friends. And it worked. I joined the cross country team and track team. And especially I love the cross country team. It's just kind of I don't know, an interesting gaggle of kids, like in the sense of a lot of kind of like quirky personalities. And so I was into it, not even so much for the athletic or competitive side, but just for I don't know, the run family part of it. And so that was in Pennsylvania. I went to college in Greenville, Illinois. I studied classical piano, and I was interested in running still, but I was afraid of how much time that would take for music. And I was like, no, I have to be practicing music for 10 hours a day, and I don't have any time for running. But that was kind of a wash. I still was able to, accomplish my, degree and senior recital and all of that. And I ended up joining the cross country team in my college, my senior year. I kind of, I just would see the team out practicing and think like, oh, I wish I were out there with them. And then I was like, well, this is silly. I should, so I reached out to the coach and joined the team my senior year. And then for whatever reason, I don't know, it did kind of unleash the competitive side of me, and I started to get curious about how fast I could get. So I continued to run just competitively as like an amateur adult after college. I chased big running goals for a little over 10 years from then to now, and then I just always still kind of in the back of my mind had this dream of hiking the Appalachian Trail one day, and it was maybe like 5 years ago that I started to make real plans for it and kind of meld the two, that nature and hiking, and then I don't know, I think of like how I'm an artist and musician, and being out on the trail, it's so much more than just an athletic pursuit. Like it feels like this all-encompassing mind body pursuit. So it's just, I don't know, the summer was like a culmination of all the things I love. So
That's awesome to hear. Ridge Runner Nation, if you guys have any questions, drop those in the comment section below, and we'll get to as many of those as we can throughout the show tonight. So what about the AT drew you to it? Obviously, you went to it at a young age and you hiked it, but what specifically drew you to the AT?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, for a while, I mean, that was the only long trail I knew of for a long time. But I think there's something about, I mean, it's this really ancient mountain range. There's something about all of the stories that have been written, like all the books that have been written about it. I think I don't really know what it is. I've just always kind of felt this pull toward the trail, and I have definitely, it's in like reading the stories about it and just kind of always dreaming of hiking it. And one day I've definitely romanticized it a little bit, as I think a lot of people do. So I don't know necessarily why specifically the AT, other than maybe it was just the first kind of one I was introduced to. Then as I learned more about it over the years, it just kind of drew me in more.
So I thought it was interesting to hear you say that it was the goal that you wanted to run the AT. Was you started like obviously at a young age, but in the past 5 years, you kind of like put it on your plate, like, hey, I'm going to do this in 2020. What was the last 5 years like in preparing kind of for that process?
I probably, I mean, since maybe the first 4 years, so from maybe 2015 to 2019, I mean, I mostly just like read a whole lot and kind of like planned a whole lot, and I focused a little. I was just kind of like, oh, what gear do I need, and what, when I think back, I'm like, gosh, I should have just like come out in the summer and done section hikes and prepared that way. But I just kind of I think for a long time, it's like, oh, 5 years seems like a really long way away. So I would just kind of, it always just seemed like this far off thing. And then in 2019, I'm like, oh, I have like a year to get ready for this. And it's one thing to like read a bunch of books about it, but another thing to actually physically and mentally prepare for the trail. So I sort of started to take it a little more seriously. And I booked a flight out to Tennessee, and in my reading, I had learned about this Appalachian Trail Institute that Warren Doyle puts on. I read about him in one of Jennifer Farr Davis's books, the current women's record holder on the trail. She's written many wonderful books, but so I went out to the workshop just to learn more about he teaches about kind of more of the psychological aspects of the trail, and then just some logistical and practical information, and offers kind of like maybe, I think it is really easy to get sucked into maybe like the forums and online and the gear, and rather than actually maybe even just getting out and hiking a little bit on the trail, or just like preparing that way. So anyway, I attended that, and then I was able to get a few ideas from him on how to just like continue prepping for as far as the physical, like athletic part of preparation. I had never done like super long distances before. I have a background mostly in road racing, and I kind of pursued the marathon distance for a while, 26.2 miles on the road. But last year, I I was kind of perusing the fastest known time website and looking at the, because of course, like my mind is, I'm just like, oh, I wonder, if I could run and hike the trail. I wonder how fast I could do it. I wonder what the current records are. And then I did the math and was like, oh, that's like, okay, 40 miles a day, over 50 miles a day. Is that like, how is that even humanly possible? And I'd go out for these, I did a practice hike in Pennsylvania from Wind Gap to Delaware Water Gap. I forget, it was a short, I mean, maybe, I'm going to get the mileage wrong, but maybe something like 10 miles. And, I ran that section, pretty technical, pretty rocky, but I was like, oh, but, I felt pretty good for that. So if I just did that like 4-5 more times like that, that seems pretty doable. There's enough time in the day for that. And it was all kind of theoretical at that point. But then I started to actually, back in Oregon, experiment with trying a 40-mile day. And then I did a practice hike with Warren out in New York and tried, multiple days doing that much. And I was, at the end of the day of, my first 40+ mile day, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. My hips are sore. Everything's sore. I don't know how I'm going to wake up and do that all over again in the morning. But then the next morning, sleep is an amazing thing. I woke up the next morning and was like, oh, I actually feel pretty good. And then I went and did it again. So it was just kind of like discovering, it's one thing to kind of theorize about it, but then to actually go out and be like, oh my gosh, I can do that. That was really exciting. So that's when the wheels started turning and I started to think about pursuing a record or an FKT.
So back then, you didn't even have an ultra finish under your belt, technically, correct?
No.
Okay. So that's crazy. So was that your longest run that first time with a 40 miler like distance PR for you?
Yeah, the longest I had gone, so I had done one 30-mile run in like 2011. My friends went, it was a Wildwood Trail in Portland. We kind of took all day to do it, like took sandwich breaks, like just kind of made it a big day thing. And then, but yeah, aside from that, I guess it was actually during the short prep hike in New York with Warren. This was like mid-August last year that was my first time going over 40 or like 40 miles or over 40 miles.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, especially with your the prep that you've done since then. Obviously, you're a 251 marathoner. You set that at Houston this year. But let's talk about going back to this past December and how you kind of maybe met the legendary Dave Horton and ran a race down in Virginia.
Yeah. So yeah, I ran the Hellgate 100K in Virginia. It is unofficially 66.6 miles, a little over 100K. But yeah, Warren had introduced me to David Horton while I had been in the midst of a prep hike. I actually had a really bad fall and tore up my knee and had to get staples in my knee. And then it was like, okay, I guess I should probably take a day off. and we we used that time to drive up to Liberty University where he teaches and to where David Horton teaches. And I told him about my ambitions of going after a record on the trail. And it was great. Like he had all kinds of questions for me and he was all like, oh, let me see your knee and wanted to see, my bloody gross knee. And then he invited me to come out to run the Hellgate 100K. So it was all kind of on a whim. That was in November. I flew out to Virginia from Oregon in December. And yeah, it was my introduction to ultra running and not only just ultra running, but like on the East Coast, like I met all these really wonderful runners in the Virginia area. There were a lot of runners kind of from the Crozet running community there. But yeah, the race it starts at midnight, so that I had never done anything like that before. And the weather was crazy. It was just raining buckets. It was 40 degrees maybe, and just no matter what you wore, it would soak through. Everyone's kind of like changing their outfits at all the aid stations, and it was just, but at the same time, it was a lot of fun, and it was the people that made it fun, the other runners, and all the wonderful volunteers that were out there in the cold. It just felt like this big like community effort. So I was just very drawn into And it was a really, even though it was just like insane, it was a great, I mean, I guess that's a good introduction to ultra racing.
That is the perfect introduction, especially this past year. Like you said, the weather was absolutely brutal. You ended up finishing fourth overall at your first ultra. So congratulations on that at
Thank
Hellgate
you.
this past year. After that, you decided to go out and run a couple FKTs. Talk about your training from Hellgate to the AT adventure this summer.
Yeah. So let's see. And so I had done that big prep hike, and it was like a week kind of straight on the 18th November, and then in the spring. So yeah, I kind of, so even though I had the Appalachian Trail coming up, I was like, oh, spring can be like my last hurrah with road racing and I was like, oh, I'll have a track season. I'll like do, I had all these kind of plans to because with Hellgate, I was in the midst of training for Houston Marathon, and doing all the speed work leading up to it. And I was like, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like I kind of was like, oh, I'll keep doing my speed work, run some road races, but also do the majority of my miles on trails. So that was all tossed out the window when COVID hit. I think I got in one 10K on the track really early in the season. And it actually just reminded me of how like horrible and hard it is to race 25 laps around the track. I mean, even though that doesn't compare with the ultra distance, it's just, it was hard. But anyway, with actual organized events out the picture, like many other runners out there, I decided to kind of check out what the local fastest known times were on the trails in Oregon, and I just kind of worked my way up in distance. So the let's see, the first one I did was Wildwood Trail out and back. It's kind of like just like very nice rolling trail, really smooth, like really good, like it, not too technical. And it was 30 miles out, 30 miles back. And there was no established women's time for like, going out and back. Another local legend, Yassine Ziboun, he had the men's time, and I was like, oh, I need a woman on the board. So I went and did that, and it was just kind of right when everything had just started to hit. Like people with COVID, it was like should I even be driving anywhere right now? Like I don't know if I should be getting gas at the gas station. So I was like, well, I'm gonna ride my bike to the trailhead. And so it wasn't that far away, but I had the idea to ride my bike. But to get from where I live to the trailhead, it's up this steep hill. So I ended up just like walking my bike up the hill. And then I just kind of had like a relaxed day out and back. I didn't even really try to push it. I was like, let's just do a 60-mile day, and felt good. And I had really good weather. And then I finished. And then at the end of the day, I had the bike ride back home. But like just as I finished, this hailstorm decided to hit Portland. And I, had just finished this long run, so I'm getting cold. And then I have to ride my bike down this hill, which requires no energy or effort or, producing body warmth. So I'm like riding home on my bike, like after, being depleted after running all these miles. And I basically like got home and got under the covers of my bed and was just there for like an hour trying to get warm. So so there's one FKT story.
So
Awesome.
With as you said, kind of a different spring after like 5 years of planning for the AT. How did you feel fitness wise going into it, even with these like big, huge efforts? Did this feel different than you were in peak marathon shape, for example?
Yeah, it definitely felt different. Like I felt very prepared going into it because I guess I didn't continue to delve into all the stuff I did in the spring. So I basically just put in more multi-day efforts just on my own, and built up to kind of doing 40-mile runs, 50-mile runs. And then I did another local FKT on very difficult terrain with 67 miles. And that felt a little more like it was at least, you cannot replicate the AT on the West Coast, and at least in my opinion, but that was the best I could do. But anyway, so I felt very physically prepared going into it, but at the same time that maybe it was kind, I didn't do a ton in the last 2 or 3 weeks leading up to it, I knew that keeping on weight during the effort would be a challenge. Like just eating enough calories to put in, 40, 50-mile days is a big challenge on the trail. So actually some advice I had gotten from both David Horton and Jennifer Farr Davis, who I had gotten, we had gotten in touch before. Like they said, like, yeah, actually like gain a little weight before you go. So I did, and that was fun, but just like, I'm like, yeah, I'll just like eat all the food. This is great. And I think that was smart. Like, I think it helps me, but it just, the way, I just maybe felt a little more like sluggish than I would have going into a marathon, because I wouldn't have just been like, I wouldn't have changed my diet drastically before a marathon. So.
Okay. And so I do want to point out to our listeners that Liz just did something that I've never heard anyone else in the ultra community do, which is compare the West Coast unfavorably to the East Coast in terms of training and terrain. Everybody loves to say, oh, well, you can't get those big mountains in Ohio, right? And they want to train for all these huge races out West, which are great races, right? But I've never heard them be like, out West, you just can't get like technical stuff. Like there's not enough rocks or roots. Like I've never fallen down and like landed in a briar patch,
Yeah, I mean that, and I to be fair, I really don't have a lot of trail running experience. But I mean, like on, I just did the Appalachian Trail, but I guess I'm just speaking on the trails I know in Oregon, and then after hiking through, the gnarly like rocks and roots, and I mean going through these sections in Pennsylvania, I had some local runners join me, and I was going through, I think I had shin splints or something, and like I actually just couldn't run, or it would have just made whatever my shin splints, it would have made them worse if I did. So we were hiking over this, this really just gnarly stuff on the trail, and I was like, do people run on this? They're like, yeah. And I'm like, really? And then I was just so amazed, because I would see trail runners out, and granted, I was in a lot of pain and just like every step hurt, so I wasn't my normal runner self in my defense, but like I was honestly blown away by the trail runners I saw, because they would just float over these rocks and like somehow not fall down. I was like, how do you do that? Like, I don't know. So yeah, so props to you guys.
We'll have to get you out for more East Coast races in the future. So drop us down to ground zero, your first couple steps, the day that you're heading out to complete the whole Appalachian Trail. Talk us through what those first moments were like and how you were feeling.
Oh, wow. There were a lot of feelings. So I actually started right at midnight for the attempt. So that was kind of cool, because I hiked up me and my crew, we were parked at there's a parking lot by a Forest Service road that's about a mile from the southern terminus of the trail on Springer Mountain. And so, I think maybe around 11:30, I hiked in. It was all just foggy, and it was really humid and damp. And, we definitely wanted to get up there with plenty of time before midnight, just to kind of like take it all in and like sign the trail log. And actually I signed the trail log the night before, but I was with David Horton as well as Warren Doyle. So Warren Doyle was my main support crew. Then David Horton came to help out for the first 2.5 days. So it was kind of cool. Like, David Horton shared some thoughts about like what was going through his head when like he was about to attempt a record, and his successful attempt on the trail in 1991, just kind of like, oh, what am I doing? I don't know, what am I getting myself into? and it's funny, because I felt strangely calm, and I don't know, I felt like the preparation, like I had gone through so much preparation, and also I think on the one hand I felt prepared, on the other hand I didn't have any idea what I was getting into. Really, I had never done a long trail like this before, so I think I was very relaxed. And it's also nice because with the nature of what I was doing, it's not a fast thing. So like we're up there, it's, I started right at midnight, and it's not like, ready, go, like, when I used to, it's like, okay, I'm just gonna kind of like, meander on down this trail and get the day started. And it was just all very kind of relaxed. So I don't know. And I think I was also just in disbelief that it was actually happening after all the dreaming and of just like, oh, it's like actually here, I'm doing this. So yeah.
So what was that first day like?
The first day, uh, I've been going back and trying to just kind of like day by day recollect everything, write everything down as soon as possible. And even now, I feel like I'm like, I came out of amnesia and I'm trying to like remember, and it's like I'll remember this one little thing and then be like, oh yeah, that's how I felt. But anyway, so I feel like I'm still trying to like to think of like to kind of like find those bits and pieces. But anyway, what I do remember from day one, like it was pretty smooth sailing overall. It was extremely humid, and even I don't think it ever rained, but it just everything was wet. Like my socks and shoes were just wet. So I had never even done this before, but I think I changed my socks and shoes twice that day, which it doesn't usually feel necessary, but I could feel blisters forming, and just wanted to be sure to at least try to take really good care of my feet. There weren't I don't remember there being a ton of hikers on the trail at that point, but yeah, I just remember the day being like pretty smooth sailing. We got to, I think it was Unicoi Gap, if I'm remembering correctly. That I think that's 52 or 53 miles in. That's where Carol Save stopped on his first day. And basically Warren, my main support crew, he was like, okay, so like, we can stop here, or, there's like basically 2 more road crossings. And I was like, well, and we, kind of the plan going into it was, here's like an ideal schedule. Like if if you're feeling good, we can try this and see if we can like put in a few really good first days and like get ahead a little bit, then have more normal days throughout the rest. And I was like, I feel good, so like I'm gonna keep going. And I went through 2 more sections of the trail and ended up putting a little over 69 miles in the first day. And I think it had just barely started to get dark. I think it was around 9 o'clock when I finished. And it was just kind of like, yeah, like feeling good, get some food in me, go to sleep, like rinse and repeat, like go again. I think we still had an early morning the next morning, but maybe like, I think it was 2 o'clock or something. But so yeah, it was a big day, but I remember overall it being pretty just like relaxed.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great. We've got 15 more days to walk through here, so we'll just go one day at a time.
Yeah, one step at a time. I did that to myself a lot this summer.
No, so take us through the next part of the story there, and as far as you want to go.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, big first day, and then the next day, I think I was feeling it for sure the second day, but I still had a good day. I think I put in. I did 56 miles, and then I won't go day by day. It might take a little too long, but yeah, 2.5 days in, there's this really giant descent down off of, I believe, I don't want to get the names mixed up, but Westerwald, going down toward the now I'm going to pronounce everything wrong. The Nantahala outdoor center. Okay. Anyway.
Okay.
You're asking the wrong audience here. We were both well-known mispronouncers.
Okay, I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing everything wrong, because I read a lot. I don't. Anyway, Nantahala Center, and I think it was like a 3,000-foot descent, and basically, I just remember that's about when I started to, to get. Shin splints, like the downhill stuff was really getting to me, but I continued on, and just like I think I just had to start incorporating more walking than I had been with the running. And then I think around 5 days in, I was still, I don't want to mess up the facts. So like maybe like fact check me. I think it was around 5 days in, I had been matching the overall record. Carol Stabe's, I had fallen off because I got turned around in the Smokies, thinking I had gotten lost. I actually did not get lost, but I hadn't seen a blaze on the trail for several miles. So I actually kind of drove myself crazy going back and forth on the trail, desperately trying to find a blaze. It was in the middle of this 30-mile section in the Smokies. But anyway, so I think I added on it was like 7 miles, which was very sad, onto this 30-mile section. So I had packed enough food and stuff for 30 miles, but I wasn't as prepared for 37 miles. I just kind of ran out of everything and got to the next road crossing and was frustrated that I had messed up and depleted, and so I chose to end the day early, and basically that made the decision of like, okay, well, if you're not gonna go on, the overall record was out. And I was like, yep, that's like, I'm letting it go. That's fine. Cause I was just like psychologically kind of done for the day. And so it was like, okay, like reframe the goal. Let's go for the women's record. We're still in a good position to do that. And so on I went. I was still dealing with shin splints, and I really couldn't run a whole lot, but I was very determined to keep just matching the miles that I needed to do. And also that was around when I started to, more people started to come out and hike with me, because the first 5 days or 4 days were very solitary. I was mostly by myself, but then I had this just like really positive experience. And Jennifer Farr Davis came out and hiked a little bit with me. And then Tara, who her trail name is Candy Mama. She's actually out on the Mountains to Sea Trail, North Carolina right now, going for the women's FKT there. But she manages Jennifer's hostel in Hot Springs, and she came out and hiked with me for a while. And so on the one hand, I was really physically suffering, but on the other hand, I started to have people come out and join me, and that was actually really helpful, just having people to talk to and kind of take my mind off of the pain. So I think I went on through day 18, I think averaging 50 miles per day. And then, I feel like right now I'm just kind of talking about, the days and miles. Like it's not really all about that. I had all of these really significant experiences throughout. It's hard to kind of like summarize everything, but I guess just through the numbers for the trail, I don't know. I was on pace for the women's record through about 18 days. But then because I was walking, I was putting in these really long hours on the trail. I was hiking 20 hours a day and getting 2 to 3 hours of sleep. And I just kept going in that manner because I was just because I'm stubborn. And I also just thought, you can work through this. Like your body's going to heal itself. You're going to get better. Like this really sucks now, but like, just keep going. And I really just kept that hope that things would change and I'd feel better. But it became clear eventually that I was not feeling better. I was just getting worse and worse. And it finally got to me. And then I think it was toward the end of the Shenandoahs, which all through Virginia, all these people from the running community came out, and I felt like I just had so much love and support and help from the community, and I had made it this far. But then I really just felt like I couldn't keep going. So I had all these, feelings of I feel like a failure, and I'm letting everyone down, and I just didn't know it. I stopped kind of at the end of the day at only 39 miles toward the end of the Shenandoahs in Virginia, and just kind of had this talk with Warren, my support guy, and we just kind of had to figure out what to do next. Like, I was like, I don't know if I'm like, do I have a stress fracture? Like, am I actually hurting myself by continuing on? Like, I can still walk, but like, I can't maintain I'm not a strong hiker. I kind of had this moment where I was just having like a pity party for myself, and this is with Warren, but I was like, Warren, I'm not a hiker, I'm a runner. And he's like, yeah, you didn't think you were a hiker, but you're hiking, like that, this is your reality. And so I like, and not that they're like one is better than the other, but I just, I know how to trail run. My hiking pace is 2.5 miles per hour, like on technical stuff. And I just kind of had to reframe my mindset that like, it's probably gonna keep hurting. You're probably gonna like not be able to continue running, and you're probably going to be going at this pace for the rest of the time. So like, so let's set some goals based on that. And so we kind of like reframed and came up with a new like ABC goal. Okay, let's try to go under 50 days. B, let's try to beat David Horton's record, 52 days. And then C, let's try to beat Heather Anderson's record, whereas hers is self-supported, 54 days, but she did that all by herself with no help. But that was the second fastest women's time on the trail. There weren't any more recorded or like supported women's attempts. So we're like, okay, well, like, that's cool. Like, why don't we try to go for the second fastest women's time? And then, the fastest known time website actually like differentiates north and south. And even if like in the lore of the Appalachian Trail, like even if that's not differentiated, maybe in the history of AT records, it's still something to kind of like, to me, I was like, well, I can kind of like with that FKT I said on the Wildwood Trail in Portland, I was like, why don't we get another woman's name on the leaderboard? Like, how about that? So like, so that kind of just helps to spark a new motivation to finish. Cause I was like, well, do I like keep, I don't want to give up, or I don't want to just say like, oh, I'll try again another year. It's like, no, I'm out here and I already did all this work, and it would just be so sad to leave the trail. And then I do think of all the people that helped me, and it's like, I want to keep going because I felt so lifted up by so many, just, I don't know, family, friends, and communities. So it was just really motivating to keep going no matter what. And yeah, so I guess like long story short, I could go into as much detail or not as you want, but yeah, basically that was kind of a pivotal moment. And then I went on, and it was still really hard. And I never had hiked through the White Mountains before, up in New Hampshire and Virginia, and just really, I really don't have a lot of experience with the really technical climbing. So I slowed down a lot more than we anticipated that I would through that. So it's like, okay, this under 50 days are out. Like, let's go for 52 days. And then, so it was just the whole time, like psychologically, it was really difficult because I felt like I was constantly just setting goals and not reaching them, setting goals and not reaching them. And it was really like, a lot of people said, oh, I can't believe like how positive you are. And I'm like, I'm glad that it's coming across, but like inside, I'm just like, oh man. And like, even just all the way through the end, I had trouble kind of, it wasn't all hard. It wasn't all pain. Like I'm kind of talking about, oh, it was so hard, but like, I had so many wonderful moments on the trail, but just psychologically getting closer and closer to the finish, it was because I had kind of like not reached my own expectations over and over again. Even the last few days, I had a hard time believing that I was actually like Katahdin's right there. Like, you're going to be there tomorrow. But so finally getting there and finally climbing Katahdin, that I could talk about that whole day in itself. Like it was really special and really surreal and really just like, I can't believe I just did that. So
So what was like one moment that you had out there that like kind of just made you realize, wow, kind of what I'm doing right now is totally epic. And like I kind of just forgot about uh all the other hardships that I was facing on the trails. What was a couple of those special moments out there, whether it was with people, like a really cool spot on the trail or just an experience you had?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I mean, the whole presidential range in New Hampshire, like that was pretty epic. That it's like just the, you know, leading up to that and the White Mountains. I mean, it's the first time you're really above tree line, you're exposed, and it's just like the scenery just kind of took my breath away. Like it felt otherworldly. I think one section that I had been looking forward to the most was Franconia Ridge. It's just kind of like this open, rocky, expansive, green, like just, I don't know, it looks like something you might think about of Lord of the Rings, or, and I've seen photos of it, and even I think a friend had a framed photo of it, or it was like a framed painting of it, and I was like, and this it's almost embarrassing. This was last year, and I was like, whoa, like where is that? And she was like, it's the Appalachian Trail, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna hike that next summer. So like, so yeah, I mean, those parts were just really amazing, and it, yeah, it just kind of took the focus off of like, oh, I need to like get this goal for the day. It's like, look at where I am. This is incredible. And then hiking up to the summit of Mount Washington, I had been pretty nervous about that because it's known for its really just like crazy, really quickly changing weather, and I was just worried about getting bad weather. And I made it, and I was hiking with a runner from Vermont, and he had actually accompanied Carol Save across to Mount Washington too. So that was pretty neat because he was telling me all these stories about Carol's record attempts or his successful record attempts in 2018. But yeah, so we got to the top of Mount Washington. I got a little picture at the summit, went into the visitor center, and I quickly texted Warren and said, hey, we made it, and the weather isn't even that bad, like on our way, yeah. And then I left the visitor center. Ted and I continued along the trail, and then like the rain just started to pitter patter a little bit, and I was like, this is fine, and then of course it just, it gets worse and worse, and then the wind starts picking up, and suddenly we're just in this storm in this really just like very exposed rocky section of on coming down Mount Washington. We had to climb up Mount Madison next, and I think it was 6 miles of exposure, so there's no trees, no cover, no anything, and we were both getting soaked, we were both starting to get cold, and there's really no option than to just keep going. Like there's not really anything else you can do. And then as we were climbing Mount Madison, the rain kind of stopped, but then the wind just majorly picked up, and it was just knocking me all around. I had one hiking pole, and it's like every time I lifted my hiking pole, it would just like swing the pole around. And then at one point, the wind just kind of like blew me sideways into this like boulder, and it didn't hurt. Like I didn't get hurt, but I was just kind of like pinned against this rock, and I like couldn't get up. And Ted was just like, are you okay? Because it looked like I was just laying there, but I was actually trying to push myself off the rock, and I couldn't. I was like, I can't get up. And we were just laughing. So yeah, so that was it was tough, but it was just fun and really memorable.
That's great, Liz. And so I think we've covered like a lot of really big details, and there's a lot of really great stuff here. But on like a day-to-day level, what was one thing, and maybe this didn't happen every day, but it happened a lot, that brought you an immense amount of joy on most of the days, and then one thing that happened also on most of the days that you just found unbearably annoying to have to deal with every day?
Well, okay, I'll start with immense amount of joy, because I haven't been talking as much about the joy so far, and there was a lot of that. So I mean, it was really just kind of like it's kind of neat. Like at the beginning of every day, you just never know like what you're gonna get. You never know what the trail's gonna hand you, and it's almost like one hiker said to me, "The trail giveth, the trail taketh away," but it's really true. So I mean, every day there would just be really just like these little special moments where I'd just stop and be like, whoa. And whoa. But like I think of, I mentioned earlier about, I was going down to the Nantahala Center and it was this 3,000-foot drop and my shin splints. But like before that descent, I was up on this ridge and it was at night. It was really early in the, like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. And just the first glimmer of light was starting to show on the horizon and the stars were still out and you could see the outlines of silhouettes of mountains just all around. And I just stopped and turned off my flashlight and my headlamp and I was just like, this is awesome. And so there were just so many moments like that. There was another time that I at the end of the day, I had the option to, I could stop at 8 o'clock, get a good night's sleep, or like do this one more 8-mile section, but like a storm was coming and, it's kind of, do I want to take that risk or not? And I was like, well, I still have daylight, I want to keep going. So I kept hiking up this ridge. You're always hiking up a ridge. So it's like, anytime there's a storm coming, you're like, well, I'm definitely going to be up high and, I'll just keep my fingers crossed. I don't know. I mean, not that I'm recommending that, so anyway, this storm was coming, the sun was going down and it got, really dark and kind of spooky for a while. But then the sun suddenly just kind of lit up everything. It lit up underneath the clouds, and then suddenly the whole forest just had this orange haze after it had been so dark just a few minutes earlier. And there were just these like, I don't know, leaves and wildflowers, and it was just there were just so many moments like that where it's just kind of like it's like a little gift almost that the trail gives you. It's almost like a reward almost for being out there. And for me, I was out there 20 hours a day. So it's just kind of like seeing it. It was almost like this like intimate aspect of being on the trail all the time. Like I felt like I just saw everything. And it was really cool. I mean, there was another moment where, I was just, I wish I could remember off the top of my head where it was, but there was maybe a 7-mile section where I was just going over this rolling grassy, like waving grass in the wind and the sun's out and there are wildflowers everywhere. And it's just like, it feels like you're in a dream. So I could keep going, but there are just so many neat moments like that. And that was really special. Okay, so there was what was the other like stuff that drives me crazy?
Yes, the second part was so when I say annoyance, I guess the meaning that I'm putting into that word is that something that is, it's not derailing your whole day, but it could totally ruin the mood. And I know for me in an ultra, an annoyance is like something that makes me want to, just like kick rocks down the trail and walk for about 5 minutes, even though I know I don't have to. Just be like, oh, this sucks, right? Like, this is so hard.
Now I'm curious about what yours are.
So, I mean, one would be like not having like what I wanted an aid station. And this is not to call out like the Mohican 100 race directors or the aid station people at all. But when I was pacing my friend Chuck there last year, I went into an aid station and they had salt and vinegar chips out. And they didn't tell me that they weren't regular potato chips. And so that was quite a shock to me at the time. And I had to hide this, right? Because I couldn't let Chuck know because I needed to be strong for him. But that was a lot for me to deal with.
It's like stuff that in maybe your daily life is not a big deal, but like,
but the minute
you have, like, certain expectations,
exactly.
You're like, all I want is this plain potato chip.
It's like I just wanted regular Lay's potato chips, and there's salt and vinegar, like of all the flavors, right?
I feel that. I feel like that's something that if you're already almost at your breaking point, like I could see myself just like crying. And yeah, I think so. Maybe I'll just, in thinking of maybe throwing tantrums, I mean, I think this started in Pennsylvania, but it just kind of continued after that. I have already mentioned the rocks of Pennsylvania, but it was just kind of this endless cycle of, I mean, basically I just stubbed my toes a lot. And it was just annoying. And like,
exactly.
The more tired I get, the more I stubbed my toes, and it wasn't debilitating. It was just like, I did spend a lot of time on the trail by myself. So I started to get very vocal with the trail. Like, I feel like I had a relationship with the trail. And like, most of the time I tried to be very like nice to the trail. Like, even when I was like I'd be like, no, you're teaching me a lesson. Thank you. Like, I would talk to the trail. And, but like every time I stubbed my toe, I would just scream. Like, I'd just be like, ah! And, as far as I knew, no one was around. Maybe that, there are people like camping up and they're just like, what is happening? Actually, that did happen. And, I think I'm too embarrassed to like mimic how I sounded now. But I sounded just kind of like a whiny child. And I had some outbursts, and then not too, like maybe 300 meters later, I came across some hikers. They were going the opposite direction. And I was like, I'm so sorry if you heard that. And they were like, we thought there was a small child in the woods. Like, we were a little concerned. I was like, oh no, it was just me. I was just having a moment. So that was really it. I mean, I'm sure there were other things, but I just remember getting so just like roots and rocks and maybe that is like West Coast, like I'm making excuses, but I just wasn't used to it. And then the more tired I got, just the worse it would just happen more and more. And yeah.
Well, you say maybe you're making excuses, Liz, but save for about 2 years where I lived in Chicago. I have lived my entire life in Rocky and Rudy, Ohio, and sometimes I still do scream on the trail when I stub my toes a bunch. So okay. I think that's a pretty reasonable reaction. I am a lot, just generally, but and so moving on from there, we've got just some like quicker questions to kind of wrap things up here a little bit towards the end of the show. The first one I want to start with is a question from the live chat. It's from Alex Jackson. He asked, if you could only eat one fast food item to fuel an ultra or a through hike, what would it be?
Ooh. Can I pick two?
I'm going to say you can do a food item and a drink.
Okay. Food item. I mean, maybe this is boring, but French fries. French fries are so good. Like, they go down real easy. They're salty. They're fatty. Oh, they're so good. I love French fries. Okay, then I'm gonna cheat a little bit for the drink, but milkshakes. Milkshakes are awesome. It has everything you would want.
You get milkshakes delivered out on the trail?
Yeah, people brought me milkshakes. At one point, David Horton put out a thing on Facebook saying, hey, come like see Liz or run with Liz on the trail. She likes strawberry banana smoothies. So like suddenly in Virginia, everyone's bringing me strawberry banana smoothies, like from McDonald's. And then I think the word got out like, oh, I like vanilla milkshakes. And then so there was one night that someone just had been reading the updates that we were putting out on my blog, and they just guessed where I'd be at the end of that, finishing my day. They were just kind of like, oh, she's been doing about X amount of miles a day. She's probably going to finish here. And they, drove out to the road crossing and we're chatting with Warren, and I came down and then this guy had brought a milkshake and I got to like finish my day and just, it was like, oh, thank you. Like, this is awesome. So yeah, that's some nice trail magic there.
That is great. Everybody loves some trail magic, either giving it or receiving it, right? Especially on the AT, just the culture of that seems to be so strong. But you've discussed a little bit your musical background. You said you're from a musical family. You went to college for classical piano. And then you also mentioned that starting the AT didn't quite have that race-like atmosphere. What atmosphere do you prefer? What's a little more electric? What do you like more, being at the starting line of a really big race or about to step on stage for a musical performance?
Oh, that's a good question. Those are both very electrifying things in a way, and they kind of play to like both. Like, I feel like I have, it kind of plays to different parts of my personality, because I love talking to people. I love the like walking out onto a stage with, like, especially, yeah, like I left out in my like life story synopsis that I played in a band and toured around the US and some international stuff for like 5 years. So that, like, we were doing headlining tours. So it's like really fun to like walk out onto a stage to like, a room full of people that are there to see you. Like it was, so that is really exciting, but I'm also very introverted, and despite that, I'm very introverted and very introspective. So those are like polar opposites. When I think, not like maybe a race, but when I think of being out on the trail or something and being so in my thoughts, and then there are things like road marathons, and I've done like the big city. Like I think of Chicago Marathon, where there are rows of people, 5 or 6 deep, and even if they're not there to see specifically you still feel like a rock star, like running through the streets and stuff. So, it's hard to choose. I don't know if I can choose one. Yeah, maybe from like the thrill standpoint, I'll say the stage.
Okay, that's a good answer. Having never done that, right? I'll say that makes total sense, and probably never having any opportunity to do that in the future.
Well, probably not at the level that she's done it as well, because she's kind of being modest right now, but she's played at some pretty awesome places. Some of you guys might have heard of Coachella or Lollapalooza and whatnot, and other venues and the concerts like that she's headlined for. So just really awesome.
Yeah, that was unreal. With like the playing Coachella, that was in the summer of 2015, and not only was it one of the biggest live audiences the band I was in had ever played for, I feel like I've given out so many numbers for the audience that I actually forget what it was, but it was definitely like, I think like tens of thousands of people, and then they were also live streaming it across the world, and so it was just like I had to just kind of not think about it when I was on. I was like, it's just, yeah, because I do think being my introverted self, I do kind of like the smaller intimate venues, and when you're just up on this like outdoor stage with like people as far as you can see, it's just like it's hard to be as connected. So the whole thing was just very like unreal, surreal. So it was really cool, but also just like, whoa, I can't believe that happened.
Kind of keeping in line with the musical topics here, we love asking our guests this question. If ultra running had walk-up songs like baseball, for example, what would yours be?
I would do jock jams. Like, it just makes me think of the 90s, like the dun, 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 dun. I don't know. I would just kind of, that would make me excited. Or I would do like a slow motion run into the Chariots of Fire theme song. Like that could be fun too.
Okay. All right. And then I heard on another podcast that you just recently did as well that Another thing when you're not just yelling at the trail because you've stubbed your toes too many times is that you'll sing on trail too, which is another thing that I've done, probably not nearly as well, both in the running and the singing aspect. But what is your favorite song to sing on trail? And was there one song that really stood out that you sung a lot on the AT?
Yes, I liked to sing Don't Rain on My Parade, Barbara Streisand. Just like, don't tell me not to live. Like, I just, like, I don't know, it's just kind of like got me pumped up. And so that was a fun song to sing. What else? Oh, hiking up McAfee Knob in Virginia. So it just seems to happen it's like as soon as I'm kind of getting to the very top of whatever mountain I'm climbing, a storm hits. And like, so that and you know, McAfee Knob, it's like a very kind of like where the iconic photo of the hiker on the little, like not little, but the rock overlooking the majestic sweeping views of the mountains. And I was like, oh, I can go get the famous McAfee Knob picture when I'm up there. And then this giant storm hits, and I'm just afraid of getting struck by lightning. And I'm like, I could just stop and not keep going, but then I don't know how long the storm is gonna last, and you know, I don't want to be hiking until midnight, so I'm just gonna keep going. And the storm was really loud, and no one else was on the trail, so I just started singing the song I Have Confidence from The Sound of Music. It's the song that Fraulein Maria sings when she's like swinging her suitcase around, going to the Von Trapp family and trying to like psych herself up for being the new governess. So I was just like, I have confidence in sunshine, and there's I have confidence in rain, and I was just singing it at the top of my lungs, and you know, the thunder was still louder than I was. So, and there were some hikers out, but I was just like, whatever, I don't care. Like, as far as them hearing me sing, I was just kind of, because I actually was scared. I was scared, and so singing helps me feel better.
Yeah, that's really great. I'm so glad to know that I'm not alone in that strange sort of habit.
No, but, you're not. And I heard hikers singing, like there was another hiker singing at the top of his lungs at one point, and he's like, oh, don't mind me. And I was like, I do it too. You know, we do what we need to do out there. So.
All right, that's great. Well, barring any last minute questions that come in from the chat, I would like to end with another one of the quick questions that we seem to ask a lot of people is, if you could run with one person in the history of the world, even if they aren't a runner, let's just say that, you know, they'll run with you and they'll be able to keep your pace. Who would it be?
Conan O'Brien. I just love Conan O'Brien. I've been watching his show, like, I think ever since maybe college, so I don't know, like, I'm, how old am I? You know, like 15 years ago. And I just think he's a really, like, interesting person, and like I just like admire his work ethic, and he's hilarious, and I don't know, I just think a conversation with Conan O'Brien would be really enjoyable, and I know he's really into cycling, so he probably could run and be fine. He has those long legs, so you know, I'd probably keep up with him.
Yeah, these answers always surprise me. Every time. I never would have imagined Conan O'Brien, but I guess I always assume people will pick like powerful people or like world leaders from the past or those sorts of things. And
like, of all the people in the universe and time, space and time.
Yeah.
Conan,
Well, if you go back to our episode history, when we were talking about the run across Ohio, and I can't not remember the guest's name, so my apologies to her, but we were speaking with this woman we had on as a guest, and we asked her that question, and she said, oh, well, my husband. You know, and I was just like, oh, that was so sweet. You know, and I keep expecting, like I said, these huge answers, right? And everyone is like so unique and so great.
I mean, that is really sweet. You know, I kind of like made this face like, oh, but actually, like, yeah, that's really nice.
That was Jen's answer on that episode, and it was a truly touching answer for sure. Like all of them have been so far. Liz, I want to ask you a quick question. It's not from the chat, but it's from me. So basically close enough. What's next for you? Obviously, you're probably still making your way. You're making your way back to Oregon slowly, but like, what's your next big adventure? What do you have your eyes set on moving forward?
Yeah, I'm kind of trying to figure that out. You know, as the I got closer to finishing the Appalachian Trail, I kind of told myself the same thing I tell myself at the end of like every marathon I do, or I think of the end of the 100K, I'm like, I'm never gonna do this again. And like, this is the last thing. I don't want to put myself through any more of this. And then like, and then I'm starting to recover, and then I just I like to read a lot, and I'm like, oh, I should, I'm interested in doing more ultra running, so I'm reading Dean Karnazes' book, like I'm reading through this, and then it just reading about other people running gets me excited about running. So I'm like, I just feel so, inspired again. So I still think I guess something, a couple things I'm excited about. I've said this a couple times in other places, but the Oregon section of the PCT, I would love to do. I'm not sure if I would ever want to hike the entire Pacific Crest Trail, but I love Oregon. I'd love to, and even if it's just for fun, or even, I'd love to just do, I just did this supported hike of the Appalachian Trail, but I think it would just be a really great experience to just like do my own kind of more traditional hike, and like take everything I need on my back, and just be, I think I'd feel just good about myself to do something like that, and be self-reliant, and maybe just kind of show myself, yes, I can do this. And then I'd also love, because I did that Hellgate run, and I ran a qualifying time to get a lottery entry into the Western States 100, and I don't know, it might, however many years, or I don't know how long it could possibly take to even get in, but I think that would just, it's just this legendary race, so I think that would be really neat to participate in that race. And then there's another ultra that just has kind of piqued my interest, is the Hurt 100 in Hawaii. I don't know, have either of you done that one? Or
I was out on the course a little bit when I was in Hawaii earlier this year, but that race is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, and I have someone I coach with, Matt Stevens, I believe he helped produce the documentary that was made about it. So he just kind of introduced me to the race, and I watched the documentary and just thought like, oh, what a neat, it's like the community part that's what got me into cross country. That's what like kind of endeared me to Hellgate, and then the community centered around the Hurt 100. Just, I was like, oh, that looks really neat. I would love to do that one day.
Yeah, that sounds really great. Well, Liz, for our listeners who want to follow you on social media, where can they find you? Any sponsor plugs? Any gear that you want to plug before we wrap things up?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Pink Feathers. It's just all one word, Pink Feathers. And then if you didn't follow the AT hike, I'd recommend checking out I made a website just for the Appalachian Trail hike. It's Mercury. That's my trail name, Mercury. It's mercuryontheat.com. And so we just have these little trail updates that were written every day. So if you're interested in just seeing kind of day by day how it went, I had so many people tell me afterward, oh, we love, my support person, Warren Doyle, his trail name for the purposes of this hike at least was Jupiter. So Jupiter wrote these just like little daily trail updates, and he got so many compliments on them. Just people loved kind of getting them in their inbox every day, and they kind of felt like part of the adventure. So if you're interested, I would recommend reading those, mercuryontheat.com. And then I also just have my like running blog website at runningliz.com. And I don't have any sponsors, but I guess I'll just, I wanted to give a shout out to some of the companies that I really like and stuff that I just actually used and on the trail. So Tracksmith apparel, I wore their shorts every day. They have like tons of pockets. I wore a lot of Wazelle gear. I'm wearing a Wazelle dress right now. And Showers Pass, they're actually a more cycling focused brand based in Portland, but I had one of their waterproof jackets out on the trail, and that was really great. And then I discovered Spring Energy Gel that someone brought me out on the trail. I usually don't like gels that it's just like pure sugar, but they're actually made with real food. It's almost like eating like baby food. Like it's just like they make these like oatmeal packs. It's just kind of like oatmeal mush, but it's like if you need a lot of calories and you want them fast, like that was just great. So I'm all about them. I'm trying to think of anything else. So I just kind of wanted to give them a shout out, and like one reason I didn't really go seeking out sponsors or a lot of like I didn't like reach out to nutrition companies for like, oh hey, I'm doing this thing, like could you send me some stuff? And I really wanted to unplug from social media during this. Like I didn't want to feel like, oh, like I have like 3 hours of sleep, but I have to, I want to make sure to plug this brand. Like so that was just, and I also just really wanted to use stuff that I just really genuinely love and use, and yeah, so that's kind of how I feel about that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, as always, we will put all of that stuff down in the description of the video below, so you can find Liz everywhere you would like to. And once again, we just want to give her such a huge thank you for coming out and joining us tonight. Liz Anjos, I just said it wrong. I was actually talking to Wesley about whether or not it was pronounced that way before the show, because as you mentioned, you learn things by reading them. That's how I read your name the first time.
Oh yeah, so, no, it's Anjos.
So Liz Anjos, yeah, thank you so much for coming out. The current Northbound FKT holder for the Appalachian Trail, potential future holder for the Oregon PCT section, John Muir Trail, Vermont's Long Trail, North Country Trail maybe, Western States 100 winner, finisher, participant.
Oh my gosh,
she didn't say anything yet.
Kind of like plan, like make my schedule.
We would be open to that.
This was really fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see you guys next time. It was so great having you on tonight. All right. Bye.